Hello, Piedmonsters, and welcome to Piedmonsters, the Piedmont Pilot Podcast, brought to you by your Piedmont MEC. I'm your host, Megan Johnson, Charlotte-based First Officer and Vice Chair of the Communications Committee. We are back with part 2 of our 2-part interview with Captain David Weidenhamer, Chair of our Training Committee. In part 1, we discussed a general overview of the Training Committee, training review boards, and what to expect during CQ. Part 2 will cover what to expect during upgrade, as well as some other miscellaneous tips and tidbits. Before we move to that, as always, we have a few quick updates from around the MEC. In case you haven't heard, our training department now has its own local executive council, or LEC, for seniority list instructors and line check airmen. This new council will be known as LEC 28 moving forward. Voting for representative positions is currently open through November 2nd. Both the Philadelphia and Charlotte LECs will be hosting go-karting events in December as our pilot group holiday parties. The Charlotte event will take place on Saturday, December 13th, and the Philadelphia event will be on Saturday, December 20th. Further details, including RSVP information, will be shared soon. The new extension rules outlined in Letter of Agreement, or LOA 57, will take place on Saturday, November 1st. Please review LOA 57 for details on these changes. Thank you, as always, for listening. Like and subscribe to Piedmonsters wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Piedmont Pilots. You can also email us at pdtpodcast@alpa.org with any comments or suggestions. And now, as promised, part 2 of our training department interview with Training Committee Chair Captain David Weidenhamer. So we talked about CQ and what people can do to prepare for that. Do you see any differences in what pilots should be doing or what they are doing or what they can do better to prepare for upgrade training? Because at this point, most of our first officers are going to end up going through upgrade training here at Piedmont. So what are you guys looking for? What can we as first officers be doing to better prepare for when we come to upgrade?
Yeah, so Piedmont doesn't have an upgrade program that is here to teach you how to be a captain. The training footprint as it's designed right now and what they're trying to get to is here to evaluate the skills that you have learned during your time at Piedmont as a first officer. So when you know that you've hit your 750-hour mark, when you start getting captain pay, you know upgrade training is going to be coming soon. When you have long sits or you have like a 50-minute sit where you're keeping the same airplane, you should be getting in the captain seat and having your captain walk you through their flows and scans. That way, you're actually getting actual touch on the aircraft buttons and not trying to learn that once you show up to upgrade training. Whenever your captain calls maintenance, ask them to put it on speakerphone. Whenever your captain calls dispatch, again, ask them to put it on speakerphone. Hear what they're saying and pay attention to what's going on. And when you start looking at the releases, when I was an FO here with paper releases, the FO only looked at the first page because the captain had to look at all the rest of it. But now with digital releases, sit there and start picking them apart. Understand your fuel checks, right? Our manual says that you're supposed to do a fuel check at the first point after the top of climb, the first point prior to the top of descent. And then there's a period of time in the middle if the flight is long enough that you're supposed to do them. And no, like if you don't understand your fuel numbers, you're going to be constantly worried about fuel. Piedmont does enough flights a day that during their average flying, their fuel numbers work. It's during the abnormal times that we have to worry. Diversions, holding, unforecasted inclement weather. But we don't get paid as ATP pilots because of the 90% flying that we do. We get paid because of how we respond during the 10%. If you're flying on a day that a student pilot is out doing traffic patterns, you're not being paid as an ATP pilot that day. You're being paid to land in that hurricane, that snowstorm, the fog. You're being paid to take off when those student pilots are not. And that's how we need to conduct ourselves because that is what is expected from the company. That is what is expected from our passengers. If Piedmont wanted us to land at our destination for every one time we took off. We landed at our destination exactly one time. We would never take off with an alternate. We never would.
That's a good point.
If we needed an alternate, we would never take off because the alternate's saying you may not get into your destination. And just understanding your fuel numbers and what you need, and don't have the plan for the alternate when you get to the fuel number. Part of being a captain is already knowing before I take off, I have to have this fuel on board. Our min fuel, we all say it. Okay, so I have that. So now we've taken off. Hey, we got to the top of climb. I'm plus 300 pounds at the top of climb. Okay, that's great. What does that mean? Well, that means that I have an extra about 5 minutes of gas if I have to hold at that point. All right, now we reach the top of descent. Hey, I'm still up 300 pounds. Okay, great. Well, my hold gas is 400 pounds, so now I could say I'm right around 700 extra pounds of gas. What can I do with that? All right, so now we're holding. Or, hey, Charlotte is going from the north to the south and they're flipping the runways. What does that mean? Well, depending on where I'm coming from, that may mean an extra 50 miles because of a 25-mile final. Do I have the fuel for that? And the time to think about stuff like that isn't when you get there, right? Those are the things that a good captain will be managing the entire time in their head. They're looking at the weather and seeing the trend. Hey, is there a chance that this field might switch? The TAF showed that the winds are going to switch a little bit. And I know, unless it's a 10 and a half knot tailwind, Charlotte's not switching the runways. Same with Philly.
Right.
They're going to do it in the middle of the banks if the weather's forecasted to do it. So that way they're impacting the least amount of crews. So again, Piedmont can't spend between 8 lessons and an MV and 4 lofts how to teach you decision making. They can evaluate your decision making. So spend your time on the line as an FO being productive. And that is the best thing I can tell you is pay attention to what the captain's doing, ask questions, look in the QRH every now and then, find something that is just abnormal and be like, hey, what's the chance of this happening?
I will say again, just anecdotally, I've been really fortunate with the captains that I've worked with that every time I have asked questions, everyone's always been more than happy to help talk through things. When we talk through, what's the alternate? What's the weather? Does it make sense for that to be the alternate? I sat down with one captain a few months ago and I said, help me understand fuel, help me understand calculating bingo, help me, what are you looking at? What are we doing? And then every leg he was like, okay, if we hold here, do the math. What's our bingo? How long can we hold? How long do we have? And that was really helpful for me. And that was just one trip. So to your point, just asking questions, the captains do really appreciate the input. Obviously, as a first officer, don't overstep. Captain is the PIC. But in my experience, they've always been happy to have that conversation and have another person that they feel confident is looking and caring and paying attention is sometimes a very important aspect and why we have 2 qualified pilots in the flight deck.
That's right. And counter to what some people will say, the ultimate job of mentorship between the captain and first officer, it is the company's captain's job to groom future captains. We're always trying to train our replacements in this world because, people flow. Well, do we want our captains to be as good or better than we were? People go to United and Delta, same thing. FOs leave to go other places. So we're constantly always trying to train our replacements. And at the end of the day, it is the FO's responsibility to seek guidance from competent people and become the best of the captains that you flew with. You'll sit there and you'll be like, hey, what are the 10 best things that I saw as an FO from captains? Pick those 10 best things and emulate those. And then look at and be like, what didn't I like? Pick the best of everybody and choose to emulate those because that's how you yourself will become a good captain. And Piedmont this summer did over 400 flights a day. Their software for
We stayed busy, for sure.
Yeah, their software for figuring out a lot of this stuff, it's pretty much type in departure, type in destination, hit enter, hit print, and then all of a sudden we have a release. And your release could have been generated hours before that dispatcher even came to work. My last time I went through the OCC, there was only I think 5 desks for dispatchers. I mean, you divide 5 desks by 400 flights.
Yeah.
That is a lot of work
busy.
for desks.
They are task saturated, to be certain. And then lastly, just mostly because I'm nosy and love information, what are some kind of not necessarily things that people would think of, but what are some like green or red flags that you see when people come through training that you see and you're like, oh, this person's gonna do great? Or like, oh, that's an interesting choice. That person might struggle, but things that like people might not necessarily think of.
Yeah. So coming through training, personalities have a lot to do with how well you do. If you're a very passive person who is always looking at somebody else to reassure that what you are doing is right, you're probably going to have some struggles in training. When you're sitting in the right seat, you have the ability to look left for guidance. When you're sitting in the left seat, when you look left, you're seeing skies, right? Your crutch for that guidance is no longer there. But what are you going to have when you're in the left seat? You're going to have that FO that is now looking left, that's looking for your guidance. So when you're in the left seat, you got to have a little bit of confidence in what you're doing is right. And having somebody who's constantly reaffirming what you're doing, you're not going to have that anymore, right? And for some
Right.
people, that is hard for them to break out of that shell and understand that they are being trusted to do this as a person who could be flying with the brand new pilot off of OE. And what's even scarier than
Absolutely.
the brand new pilot off of OE? The brand new pilot who came off of OE and then got vacation and now has some time off,
Right.
has a couple weeks off
Right.
and is
Or
now coming back.
3 or 4 months of reserve with not a lot of flying.
That's right. But we need to
Yeah.
be able, as captains, you have to be able to pick up that slack and hold them a little bit accountable to what their job is and understand that you might have some flights that don't go perfect. And even though Piedmont wants all the flights to go perfect, as long as people come out of it as better pilots after the fact, no safety standards were violated, learning occurred, then that is okay too. You know, if we
Yeah.
left without having to do any ASAPs and we didn't get any phone numbers for pilot deviations, we didn't violate anything out of the FOM or AOMs, we have some rope that we can be able to fly within, some spectrum of what we're allowed to do. And sometimes some teaching has to occur.
There-
95% of Piedmont flying is done on one sheet of paper. It's done on the normal checklist. Probably more than 95% of Piedmont's flying. One sheet of paper, the normal checklist.
Yeah.
But the majority of CQ is spent in that giant book called a QRH because that's our abnormal flying, right? Our normal flying is an RZ6 airport during VMC conditions. But if we get lazy
Right.
flying on an RC day, then we're not setting ourselves up for success when the weather is not RC. Going into Roanoke, the mountainous airport with a nice crosswind, and they only plowed one runway and it's RC. That's what we're preparing for. That's why you hold the standard on good days. So that way, on the days when the weather is bad, you're used to holding the standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I mean, the entire purpose of all of our training and the role of the training department is to make sure that we're prepared for, like you said, the bad days. That's when we're being paid to be ATP pilots. So that's what it all comes down to. And that is what we strive to protect and uphold.
And a pilot's number one job, protect your PRD. And only you can protect your PRD. Being prepared. Being
We
prepared
need
every
like a
time you
Smokey the
show up to
Bear
training.
for that.
That's right.
Only you can protect
Only
your
you.
PRD. I like that. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate all of the insight. And as a person, like I said, who just went through CQ and hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be seeing you guys for upgrades soon. I very much appreciate the insight, and I will be hopping into the left seat to start practicing my flows.
And I hope
Appreciate the suggestion.
you have a great time doing it. This is supposed to be fun at the end of the day.
Anyway, thank you again, David. Very much appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. See you later.